Hey guys, so this is a follow-up to our discussion topic that I posted later last week about relationship building amongst the dogs you have in your household. So wanted to talk about ways that you can enhance those relationships because sometimes dogs can coexist in the same home, but they don't always really enjoy each other. And sometimes they're okay in certain situations, but not others. So we really want to take advantage of those times when they are okay and work on, making them feel better in one another's company. Because we can't make everyone like everyone else, but when they're having a good time together, it certainly will help. So I have a couple things that I do, because not all of my dogs love each other that much. Navy and Remo being the hardest relationship in my house. Although right now Frankie Pickles and Remo are pretty tough because Frankie Pickles thinks Remo should be her best friend that wrestles with her, and Remo thinks that wrestling has no business happening anywhere near him. So I'm navigating some of those challenges, which are common in old dog and puppy. And then also sometimes you just have two dogs that are I don't really like you, which is Navy and Remo. Navy likes all the other dogs in the house a lot. And Remo, her tolerance is a lot lower for her. She gets really annoyed by him. And I think she would prefer if he didn't live in our house, but they can coexist really well now because I've worked on it. So things that I've done. Probably the most important and easiest thing to do is I praise the dog a lot. And I almost never use food in this scenario because food sometimes is a trigger, especially if resource guarding is an issue. Or if you live with as many dogs as I do, when I pull out food, it makes my whole group of dogs get really excited as a group. And that's not necessarily the goal I'm going for. Say if I'm watching TV and I find Navy and Remo sitting together nicely, or Remo walks past Navy and she doesn't react, I wouldn't necessarily want to pull out food in that context and get everyone all hyped up and change what's actually happening. But one of the nice things about the dogs I live with is they do actually like praise. They find it really nice. Now, the level of praise you do would depend on the circumstance, because most of the time when I'm using praise, I'm not trying to increase arousal. So if we're going the woohoo, you're a great dog kind of praise that we do with a recall training, that's probably not going to work that well. So what we want to do is praise that's kind of low key, let them know that they're a good dog, that they did the right thing, that they're making great choices, and not getting them hyped. So what that usually looks like for Navy is I'll literally look at her and I'll say, oh, what a good girl. And I'll just take her little chin in my hand. I'll give her some pets just the way she likes them. And for her, that's so reinforcing. So again, every dog is different. Some dogs might not want touch. Some dogs might not care about praise. But if they do, and you can deliver it and be super aware of the scenarios where the dog is actually tolerating the other dog at a really good level, and you're reinforcing that with praise, it can go a long way. And for Navy, it's a game changer. Because if she's tense or uncomfortable and I start telling her she's a good girl, she really relaxes and she's quite happy about it. So for certain dogs in a lot of scenarios, that works awesome. Another thing that you can think of doing is fun activities for the dogs that they can do together in smaller groups. So for example, Navy's really great on leash. She's easy to walk. She's not reactive anymore. We worked through that years ago. So she's a lovely dog to take for a walk. And Remo likes going for walks. He's not reactive either, but he's very slow, very, very slow, and he likes to smell everything. So one of the things I can do with them together is I can take them for sniffy walks. So for Navy, I wouldn't want to take her for an on-leash walk for a sniffy walk where we go all the time, because then she might be eager to move too quickly. But if I go somewhere new where there's a lot of scent and things to smell, her and Remo can enjoy that activity without having any agitation with each other. And it creates a bonding moment for them where they're completely comfortable and they're doing something they enjoy with me, and they're not competing with the other dogs in the family, and they're not being over aroused by the other dogs in the family, and they're not being triggered to guard or take something from one another. Because again, in this case, I'm not using food because resource guarding is part of their relationship problem. I'm just letting them explore a new environment, get their sniffs in a really calm, easygoing way. So that kind of thing is great to do, especially if you're dealing with a resource guarder or a space guarder in your home. Taking them to a neutral place to bond can really help that along. So knowing what's triggering the dog issue between the two dogs, and then choosing an activity that just won't trigger that, because we want it to be a feel-good activity, not a let's tolerate each other in a uncomfortable situation activity. So like if I brought them both to a confined area and I was feeding them lots of food or giving them something high value and they had to be together, that would be triggering and uncomfortable, versus a wide open space with no food is kind of the opposite, which is what we're striving for in this case. The other thing I find that can really help with dogs having tolerance and building better relationships with each other in a home is actually getting a lot of one-on-one time with the handler. Because if part of the issue is they're resource guarding you, or they're wanting attention from you, or they're really demanding and pushy type dogs, if we're feeding that need with each dog separately as much as we can, then the relationship between the two dogs should start to be less competitive. And sometimes if you have other family members, so most of my dogs tend to glom onto me because I'm the one that's home all the time, with the exception of Story. She's glommed onto James. But say if Navy got some one-on-one attention with my husband versus me, she's still getting one-on-one attention. It's less competitive, that needs being met, and it creates less pressure for her to try and seek that out all the time with the other dogs competing for it. So when you have a lot of dogs, I know it's really hard to do, and that's where you could go to small group activities for some dogs, and then one-on-one for the dogs that are struggling more, and just really being picky about how you're going to manage the time and allocate it to the dogs that need it the most. So then the other thing is, of course, if we're relationship building between two dogs, we want to do management in place to avoid the problem areas, because we can be doing all these cool, great things, but if we're allowing bad behavior that's triggering to the dogs to continue, then we might not be making any progress. So for example, in the relationship between Navy and Remo, because I've been using them as the big example here, they're fed in separate spaces. So Navy goes in her crate with the door closed, Remo goes in his cubby. I stand there and make sure there's no interaction that's unpleasant. When I do bones with them, Navy can have bones with the group. Remo goes into a different room with a shut door. He doesn't have his bone out with any of the other dogs because his social skills are so crappy that he thinks he could just take things from anybody no matter what they're communicating to him. So he's always separate. And that's just a management piece I have in play continually, because I don't want to step backwards in the relationship building between the two of them, because I'd like them to eventually really like to be around each other. I'd like to be able to sit on my couch and have Remo walk over Navy and not have to go, oh, what's her body language doing? I would like that to stop. Whether that's realistic or not, who knows? Every dog is different. They're making a lot of progress. I actually don't have to be as edgy anymore. I do make sure I praise it. I am hyper aware of it. I don't know if that'll go away, because I'm a dog trainer. But I'm not having an issue where if Remo walks by Navy on the couch anymore, where she's really getting agitated, stiff, or growling. She might just give him a little side eye and then look at me because she wants her praise, and everyone can relax and be happy for the evening. So try and plan the relationship building things to be fun, non-triggering, and try to avoid putting the dogs in the situations where it is triggering. And for some dogs, that might be seeing each other inside the house, versus if you go somewhere outside and neutral, they're good. So your crate and rotate scenario would need to take that into account. Sometimes it's toys. So if the dogs are really competitive over toys, I would eliminate toys in the home. I'd have toys for one-on-one play only, or small groups if the dog was good in a small group with certain other dogs. So you're just avoiding those triggers with the two dogs or more that may have issues with one another. So hopefully that helps everyone. Love to chat about this more. If you have examples or scenarios you want to talk about, let us know.